Hello, this is Andrea Hendricks. The topic of this video lesson is on circles through equations and graphs. Specifically, we're going to define the standard form of a circle. Given a center and radius of a circle, write the equation of the circle in standard form. From the equation, find the center and radius. Use completing the square to write the equation in standard form, and graph circles by hand, and we will also talk about the domain and range. So let's talk about the standard form of a circle and what is a circle, right? I mean, you've seen circles all your life. To define them mathematically, what we think about is this. A circle is the set of all points that are equal distant from the center or from some fixed point, right? So it is the set of all points xy that are equidistant from a fixed point and we'll call that fixed point HK. That fixed point happens to be the center, and the distance from the center to a point on the circle is what? Yeah, you hopefully have seen this throughout your life. It's the radius, right? That's what we call the radius. So the distance from the center to the point on the circle Now, I've drawn a circle here with the center of 0, 0, but let's, for the purpose of this, just think of it as HK for the time being, and then we'll talk about what happens if it is 0, 0. So do you remember the distance formula that you learned? The distance between any 2 points can be found as what? The square root of x sub 1 minus x sub 2 squared plus y sub 1 minus y sub 2 squared. This formula is going to give us the general form or the standard form of the equation of a circle. So if I would plug in xy to be one of the points, my center to be HK, and my distance to be r, I can get the standard form of a circle. So we're going to have this, and let me put the x and y's on the left hand side. So I would have, let's say, the square root of, well, x1 minus x2. So I'm going to make a substitution here to have x1 minus x2, which would be x minus h squared, plus then my y1 minus y2 would be y minus k squared. And that's equal to what? Well, the distance, which is r. Okay, so all I did in that case was plug in a point on the circle and the distance from the center and the radius being r. Plug that into the distance formula and I get this. Now we can undo that square root by squaring both sides, and if we do that, we would get this equation: x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. This is the equation of a circle where HK is the center and R is the radius. Okay. Now, one other thing, just to point this out now, we'll talk about it more later on, but do you notice that the circle does not pass our vertical line test? So it is not a function, but it certainly is a relation, because a relation is just a set of ordered pairs. So just to kind of keep that in mind, that the circle is an example of a relation that is not a function. Now, this form you need to have memorized, because from that you're going to be able to identify the center and radius. You're going to given the center and radius, put it in the form so that you can get the equation. So you need to have a good, comfortable working knowledge of that formula. So let's look at the second objective where we are given a center and radius and we want to write what the equation of that circle would look like. Well, the main thing you've got to keep in mind is that general form is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. So if you know the center, which is h and k, and the radius r, you can get the equation. So if we have a center of 2, 5 with a radius of 3, we would know that our h and k are 2 and 5. Our radius is 3, or r, right? So we would have x minus h, which is 2 squared, plus y minus k, which is 5 squared, is equal to the radius squared. And so we can simplify the right-hand side to make this x minus 2 squared plus y minus 5 squared is equal to 9. And that's all you need to do right now. Okay, don't try to solve it for y or anything like that. That will come into play if we have to use a graphing calculator to enter this, but right now we're not going to do that. Now let's look at this next problem where we have a center of -1, 4, and the radius is the square root of 5. So I would have my center HK, my radius R. So plugging into the standard form, I get x minus h, which in this case is a -1, so just be careful with those negatives. So we would have that. Okay, sorry about that. I just got a phone call I had to take. Okay, so if we have a center of -1, 4, and a radius of the square root of 5, when we put it into the standard form, we would have x minus -1 squared plus y minus k, which is 4 squared, is equal to the square root of 5 squared. So when we clean this up, we would get x plus 1 squared plus y minus 4 squared is equal to, do you remember the square root of 5 squared is just simply 5. Okay, and again, you're not going to do anything else with that. You don't need to square those binomials, solve for y, just leave it in that standard form. Now, from the equation of a circle, let's do the reverse. So given the equation, let's find the center and the radius. So again, let's write up our formula as a guideline for us when we have x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. So we want to find out the values of h and k and the values of r. So in this example where we have x minus 7 squared plus y minus 4 squared is equal to 25, it's in the standard form. Our value of h and k are readily available. It would be 7 and 4. And the radius, we know r squared's value is 25, so that would tell us that r is equal to the square root of that, which would be 5. Okay, so the center of this circle is 7, 4, and the radius is 5. So since the formulas have a minus sign built into them, we always take the opposite of what is inside parentheses to find the center. So here we have x plus 2 squared plus y minus 3 squared is equal to 7. So to solve this one for the center, we would have the value of h is what? Right, it's -2. The value of k is 3. So remember to take the opposite signs of what is inside those binomials. And what about the radius? Okay, so we know r squared's value is 7. To find r, we would take the square root to get the square root of 7. So we have a center of -2, 3 with a radius of the square root of 7. Now, some equations are not going to be in that pretty nice formula, and we have to do some work to get it in that form. And so here we're going to have to use completing the square, and we've done that before when we had standard forms of parabolas. Do you remember to complete the square, you have to have a coefficient of 1 on x squared, and then you would take half of the coefficient of x and square it. And then you have to add that number to both sides. Okay. So in this problem, x squared plus 8x plus y squared minus 6y plus 16 equals 0. We actually are going to have to complete the square twice because we've got to get the x terms and the y terms in that binomial squared. So what I would want you to do is say x squared plus 8x, and then leave a space, plus y squared minus 6y, leave a space, and then we need to remove this 16 to the other side, and we can say is equal to negative 16. So when we look at x squared plus 8x, what number would complete the square? Right, we have to take half of 8. Half of 8 is 4. 4 squared is 16. So we have to add 16 to both sides. Then we have to do what? To complete the square on y squared minus 6y, we have to take half of 6, which is 3. Squared would be 9, and we add it to both sides. So now this x squared plus 8x plus 16 can be written in the form of x plus 4 squared plus y squared minus 6y plus 9 would be y minus 3 squared. Right, remember the sign on the middle term comes down, and then the number we squared is what goes in parentheses. And then on the right hand side, that's just simply equal to 9. So now from that, we know the center of this circle would be negative 4, 3. And what about the radius? Right, we know r squared is 9, so the radius is the square root of that, which is 3. Now, 9x squared plus 36x plus 9y squared equals negative 32. To be able to solve this problem, we have to understand that we have to have a coefficient of 1 on the x squared, and so, or on the y squared for that matter. We have to divide everything through by 9. So we would have, what, x squared plus 4x Okay, so we divide by 9 to get x squared plus 4x plus y squared is equal to, kind of ugly number, negative 32 over 9, but just leave it in that form for right now. And then we need to follow through by completing the square. So x squared plus 4x, we can complete the square by inserting what number? Right, half of 4 is 2, 2 squared is 4, so we have to add 4 to both sides. Now you'll note I didn't do anything to the y squared because it's already in the form that we need it. There's no term with y there, so there's nothing that needs completing. And so we would rewrite this to be x plus 2 squared plus y squared is equal to, then we need to combine like terms. 4 is really, what, a common denominator that's of 9, so that's really 36 over 9. And minus 32 over 9 would be what, 4 over 9? So our center in this case would be negative 2, and then there's no number added or subtracted to the y, so that has a value of 0. And the radius is going to be the square root of 4/9, which would be 2/3. Okay? And let me go back for just a minute. It dawned on me, I don't think I actually talked about how the equation looks when the center is 0, 0. I apologize for that. So let's just say if the center is 0, 0. When we plug in to this formula, we would have x minus 0 squared plus y minus 0 squared is equal to r squared. So that would just give us x squared plus y squared is equal to r squared. So you see that if the x and the y don't have a number attached to them, the part of the center corresponding to that coordinate would be 0. So what would the equation look like if we had a, just to add an extra one here, center of 0, 0 with a radius of 4. So therefore we would have x minus 0, or x squared really, plus y minus 0 squared is equal to 4 squared. Or that's just x squared plus y squared is equal to 16. Okay. Now, let's do the last objective, which is to graph circles, and we'll talk about the domain and range of that as well. So to graph circles, you need to know the center and the radius, and I'll show you how you use that information to plot the graph. So our center for this one is what? It is 3, negative 2, and our radius, again, we know r squared is 4, so the radius would be the square root of 4, or 2. So where you begin is plot the center. Now the center is really not a part of the graph, so to speak, right? The circle is actually all the points around that center, but you have to have that key point to be able to plot. So we start by plotting 3, negative 2. So write 3, negative 2. Now our radius is 2. We know exactly what it means to move over 2 in 4 directions. We know how to move right, up, left, and down. And that's what you're going to do here. So we're going to move 2 units to the right. If we move 2 units to the right, that's going to be the point 5, negative 2. 2 units up, and all these are from the center. So if we do up, that would be what? 3, 0. 2 units left would be 1, negative 2. And 2 units down would be 3, negative 4. So our circle then would be all the points that lie with those being connected. Now, hopefully my circle by hand on a piece of paper would look a little bit better than it does on this computer, but that is the idea. Now, we already talked about the fact that it's not a function. So how would we find the domain and the range, though? Right, so the domain goes from left to right. So where do we start from the leftmost direction? Where do we end? So we're looking for our x values, right? And our x values begin from the left at 1, and where do they end? They end at 5, right? So we have a domain of negative 1 to 5, and the brackets are included because those points are actually points on the graph. Now what about our range? Our range goes from bottom up, right? So I'm just going to do it over here. If we come over here, bottom up, where are those values? So the y values are negative 4 to 0. Okay. Now what about x squared plus y minus 5 squared equals 16? So the center of this circle is 0, 5. The radius is going to be the square root of 16, or just 4. So we go to 0, 5, which is up on the y-axis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we've got to go out from there in all directions 4 units. So we would go 1, 2, 3, 4, and this would be the point 4, 5. Go down 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a point 0, 1. Up 5, up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, which would be what, 0, 9, and left 1, 2, 3, 4. So this would be negative 4, 5. And then we would connect these points to get the circle. Okay? Now what's the domain and range? So from left to right, it's from -4 to 4. And from bottom, top, would be from 1 to 9. Okay, so that concludes the material with the circle. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. Thanks. Bye-bye.